Welcome to AI Today. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Beddoe. I've gotten a lot of questions over the last few weeks about large language models specifically. And, it's a topic that we've touched on a little bit. We've mentioned it every episode, but we haven't really specifically gotten to some of the details about them. The number of models that are out there, how you choose them, what they can be used for, what kind of data is most appropriate for those models. And so this week, we figured we would just jump right in both feet and really tackle, how these large language models are able to really be leveraged, able to be used, and of course, some of the ethical challenges and HR issues that they can cause. And so this week, I'm welcoming back no stranger to the program, of course, Dr. Jay Lee. Of course, he is a visionary in industrial AI. He's a Clark Distinguished Chair and Professor at the University of Maryland. And, he is really spearheading, how AI can be used in the manufacturing process. Dr. Lee, it's great to have you back again.
Well, thank you for having this opportunity again.
Yeah, and Dr. Lee, we before we got on, we were talking about just large language models in general, and of course the buzz when ChatGPT, OpenAI, whenever they release a new version of their model, or all of the other new versions that are coming out that really have even more capabilities than before, from all the generative capabilities, to now of course video capabilities, analysis, those sort of things, and from a manufacturing process and from a really an employee process, it's a challenge, and it's something that companies are looking at. But from your experience, Dr. Lee, how are you envisioning these large language models fitting into a manufacturing ecosphere?
Well, let's look at it, right? The AI has been there for a long time, over 5-6 decades, right? The generative AI for the last 5-7 years, and OpenAI came out. This is called the ChatGPT a few years ago, and then everything, right? It go in the sky, skyrocket. So you look at why it happened. The reason is people see the potential to incorporate large language model from text, images, video, now audio, in a broad range of creativities and potentially service industry, right? For example, if you look at a traditional industry like Microsoft and Google, Meta, and Amazon, they start using this large language model to help the customer services, right? Which is that's the key thing. But in industry, many industry, we're talking about our domain knowledge, not language, right? So we can use, because the large language model is based on open source data. But in many industries, we don't use open source data only. We use a lot of domain source, which means our corporate knowledge, employee feedback, our corporate policy, the human resource services, right, etc., etc. So those are customers with employee-centric, business-centric, and customer-centric. So those are not open source. There's a more differentiation, actually. So we see most of our edge is making decisions faster, learn faster, help customer service faster, right? I think that is the bottom line for industry.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the questions that I've gotten a lot of, asking, well, why can't ChatGPT answer X question, or why is it not able to give me this type of data? And a lot of times it's because it's already proprietary, and that kind of information hasn't been trained into most of these models, unless of course you've developed it yourself, or you've fine-tuned it and you've taken it to that next level. And I think folks need to continue to understand that as you're trying to apply it to your situation, it's not an easy button. From your perspective, how do you think, especially with the work that you're doing within industrial AI and the students that you're training, how are they embracing ChatGPT to, leverage in their activities that they're working with you on?
Well, first of all, from learning perspective, we are very open to support students to use the tools to learn as fast as they can, right? As broad as they can. But certainly, those tools should not be used to do something students supposed to do by themselves. For example, I'm the guy learning how to write a code. You should learn how to write a code, rather have someone give you a code and you don't even know how to write, right? So we still, if you're my student, we said, oh, well, we need to develop our code, right? But you can use other code as a reference. That's good. But you should have a capability to write your own code, right? That's number one. Number two, you should have a good judgment to evaluate what's good, what's not good, right? If some code is a problem, can you differentiate? Can you identify those problems? You need that kind of knowledge when you start using this open source like GitHub available code, right? You should be able to judge, evaluate. That's kind of new skill sets now, right? Other develop something, I also have a judgment to evaluating, to assessing the trustworthiness of the code or usefulness of a code, right? Of course, but we also encourage students to use a new method. For example, we have a domain research for each company, each industry. We're developing called large knowledge model to augment the large language model. For example, large model is we interview domain expert to inverse their experience back to a good reusable knowledge. Then we use that to use called the feedback to the user rather to wait for employee to ask the prompt to ask. You can remind employee what they need to do, right? So that's for inverse, not just waiting for people to ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really from what I've seen with companies that are deploying, large language models, especially on the service desk. It really is that, that digital twin that really can help accelerate the learning process. You bring on a new employee and, especially when the models are trained on your internal processes, the speed that you can get them actually doing some real work is tremendous. It's at least, 2 times faster than it was before, and probably even more than that. And I think, that's where the biggest benefits are going to be. When you start looking at the manufacturing industry as a whole, you guys have really been leading the way from AI and robotics anyway. Is there a big impact that you've seen or heard on how these large language models are being used in that industry specifically?
Well, there are many cases, for example, especially in the design, product design. For example, like I'm designing a new battery. Instead, select each material and then to evaluate, simulate, and testing, experiment take too long, right? So we can have first, we can identify maybe 20 options first, then using this a potential to weed out those potential maybe 18 options based on the constraint. Could be availability of materials, could be the some of the performance, energy density, etc., etc. Then we can validate quickly. So which means you use that for new material design to accelerate from discovery to deployment. Normally take a long time, right? You can shorter time to 10x. Wow, that help us to move on faster, right? Number one. Number two is operations. There's so many unknown knowledge we don't know about it. We need to use those a domain source from a employee, from customers, help us to mine those potential hidden opportunities, right? So those two areas to me are fast growing area, can help either do better design and better decision making and better priority for operations.
Yeah. How are you using are you using one specifically for some of the things that you're working on over the summer?
Yes, we are helping the companies to evaluate. For example, they have a lot of testing thing to be done, a lot of product testing. Rather to do one step at a time, we can do virtual testing. So virtual testing means I can make a virtual mistakes, right? I don't have to make a real mistakes. So
That's
if I
right.
can make a 5, 6 different virtual mistakes to help me select those most critical design experiments, then save me time, right? So number one, time reduction is very important. Yeah, time reduction is the most important benefit, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So if we can make that happen, that's what we're doing right now during the summer, work with a few companies.
Okay, that's great. Do you plan on trying to train your own model, create your own large language model, or are you using some of the commercial ones that are available,
Well, there are
or all of the above?
Yeah, there are two different models. One is a domain knowledge model, which we use called the large knowledge model. We have to use structured data, unstructured data from a company, from domain source. Those we have to develop ourselves with industry together. Another thing is you have a open foundation model, like a Llama 2, Llama 3, Copilot.
Yep.
You can just use them to process a standard foundation model require generative learning, right? So you need two together. We call it retrieval augmented generation, RAG, right? So that can use combined together, you can do a good job.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Dr. Lee, why don't you tell everybody where they can get a hold of you? Since you have the summer, I know you have so much time to just talk to folks. How can folks get a hold of
They
you if
can
they have any
Google my
questions?
name, Jay Lee, and UMD. Also, Industrial AI Center called iaicenter.com. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. As always, Dr. Lee, I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Fantastic conversation. Folks, please stick around. We'll be back after a short commercial break. I'm Dr. Alan Bedeau, and welcome back to AI Today. Here we're exploring AI's potential, its ethical challenges, and how small businesses and really just the everyday user can take advantage of it to either get a strategic advantage in their business, in their job, or even get some time back so that they can do some other things. This week, it's a pleasure to have Mr. Ben Nybert from DB Aero Incorporated. He is the chief of staff for DBT Aero. Ben's got a comprehensive background that spans 25 years across multiple countries and industries. His education includes a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. I can relate to that. An associate degree in Air Commerce and Flight Technology from the Florida Institute of Technology, and an MBA from the McGuire Graduate School of Management. And he's worked at Cessna Aircraft Company and before joining the team at DBT Aero, and he has had multiple consultant opportunities and really an expert in flight. So Ben, it's fantastic for you to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and so Ben, when Michael was on, just to refresh everybody's memory, Michael Duke is the CEO. When Michael was on, we talked about a broad topic of AI and its applicability across a whole bunch of different flight systems. And with the release of the new ChatGPT and all the other commercial companies that are releasing new versions of their large language models, can you tell us a little bit about what your process is and how you think about using AI and large language models, really just in general over at DBT Aero?
Yeah, well, we see the large language models in three categories. One of them is the idea of augmented. So they're assisting, they're doing things that help the pilot or help the person to better perform a given task. For example, focus on your camera is a great example. You're doing something and the augmented intelligence is supporting you in doing that so that you get a better outcome. And in a lot of cases, the software, the language model, the processor is keeping all the data. So if you don't like the decision that the augmented intelligence made, you can go back and fix it. You can change it back or turn it off. The other level we look at, which is artificial intelligence, which is the kind of general term everybody uses, where you're applying data to a problem. For example, suggestions on how to write something more clearly. So it's doing an analytical approach of something you're already doing. And then you look at generative AI. That's a whole nother game where it's collecting a huge amount of information and looking for an outcome you may never have thought of. You're asking it a very general question, and arguably it's creating something you haven't thought of. And when we look at the decision process and how we're going to use this sort of leverage, there's a lot of different ways to go. And then we have to really consider, and of course, people using AI, to be very careful at considering how you're going to use this model or use this technology to benefit. So when we're talking about in flight and we're talking about augmented or artificial intelligence in flight, we're trying to get an efficient flight. We're trying to control complex systems with a single pilot, where normally, if you think back not too long ago, it took 4 pilots.
Yeah.
If you were in an airliner, you had a pilot and a co-pilot who were both busy doing things. Then you had an engineering officer to control all the systems. And besides that, you had a navigator that had to be able to shoot the stars in a very limited amount of time to get a position and write it on a piece of paper and pass it to the pilot. So we started out with basic software and programming. And as we move forward, we become very efficient. And all of a sudden, you can tell the plane to fly between 2 points where no nav aids exist at all. And you don't need anybody to shoot the stars to do it. The system knows where it is. It knows how to interpret data across a wide range of inputs and come up with an optimal route that goes from A to B. So these are the sorts of things we're looking at. But in the aircraft, it has to be very secure. You have to pick a model that runs in the air, that can be completely independent. So if you lose all your communication, this artificial intelligent model can operate without external control or input from a human. And a lot of the application for that right now, and for DBT Aero, is in our UAVs, right? Unmanned vehicles. We want to be able to say, go out here and do this task. And if the environment changes, you have to adjust. Mm-hmm. Follow the pipeline, but don't fly into any bridges. Follow the pipeline, but look out for other aircraft that might also be using the pipeline as a navigation aid. So there's all this intelligence that has to be able to adjust, it has to think, and has to do a lot of that on board.
Yeah.
Because it may lose signal.
Right. And I think that's amazing. I think that for folks at home that are watching, I think that's an important concept to really dig into a little bit more, and that you're giving the UAV a problem, and it's using its AI brain to solve that problem by whatever means is necessary. And so it's not like automation. I try to differentiate that every week. It's not like automation where you're giving it a bunch of steps and it's automatically executing those steps. You are giving it something, an end goal, and its challenge is to get to that end goal as optimized and best as it can, correct?
Right. Well, when I started out at Cessna and we were in the factory, the machines were programmed. You would type in line by line what you wanted this machine to do, and it would do exactly what you told it. Sometimes you didn't get the result you expected. When I first learned to program a machine, I forgot one line of code, and the head of this thing crashed into a part at a tremendous rate of knots. You could hear it all over the factory. And I thought, now looking back, you think artificial intelligence would have been really handy to have said, hey, that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So in the aircraft, we're dealing with this idea of complete autonomous. It has to be able to look at problems and solve them. But when you get outside the aircraft, now you're on the ground and you're doing something like design work. Now you're dealing with things like iterative. We can take something like a wind tunnel data. We can take years, months of flight data, consolidate that down to a large language model, a large data model, have the artificial intelligence analyze that information and look for points of efficiency, look for problems with our aerodynamic design where we can eke out a few more points. So the great thing about the DBT design, the double box tail, is it's dramatically more efficient in itself. You're talking 30% more efficient design than a standard airplane platform. So we start out better. But now, if you're putting in alternate propulsion units and you want to optimize the efficiency of the aircraft, which is obviously our goal, we want to optimize the efficiency of the aircraft because that's what we're selling. Then we want to be able to analyze that data and find places through iterative analysis, and AI can do that in minutes. The other thing AI can do is scale, not just scale the AI model, but as we start with a UAV and scale up to all the way to a corporate aircraft, the AI can look at the design and start to find places where we're losing efficiency as we scale up, or it can find alternatives to sizes that we might not have thought of manually to get us a more efficient design. Again, going back to Cessna, and I'm not picking on Cessna, started in the 20s, and they've done fairly well. I've got thousands out, almost 1,000 hours in Cessnas, and I'm still here. But when we did things like fairings for the wheels, we had a guy come out with clay, and he would make something, and he'd eyeball it, and he'd say, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we'd test it, and we'd say, yeah, no, that doesn't work. And he'd try again, and he'd try again. And in one case, he did an aircraft, and it was better with nothing than what he put on it. So he had to start all over. And it took months to get the wheel pants on an airplane right. AI could have done that in 0.4 seconds.
Yeah.
And we'd have had a perfect design. Of course, back then, we had a room full of computer and it ran parts lists. So, we didn't have the capacity. So, and then you look at things like operations. So we say, okay, in the air, we've got these decision criteria. We got to be secure. We got to be independent. Has to be scalable so that when nothing is going wrong, it's not using a lot of power. And suddenly you're faced with flight challenges. Something happens, storms coming up, and you're re-optimizing flights. It has to be able to scale up, do all the analysis it needs, re-plot the course, reposition the aircraft, all those things. The next thing, when you're on the ground, you've got design, where you're doing iterative design. You can scale up efficiently because you've got a box on the ground with all the power you'd ever need. And then the last part of this is operations, where we might want it to be creative. And if you're getting into that creative element of saying, okay, we want to look at completely different alternatives to our supply chain. We want to look at alternatives to how we manufacture the parts or how we chop up the airplane to make parts that we assemble. We want to look at some wide ranges of it. Now, when we're doing those sort of modeling, now we need a lot of transparency. The engineering teams that are looking and interacting with this model, they have to be able to say, how did it get there? Or is this a phantom?
Yeah.
Is this untrue? Did it create something that is inherently false and we can't see it? So transparency, scalability, power, parallel processing, all those things start playing into this idea of generative AI, where it's creating something new, but we got to be able to see how it got there. Not to mention the idea of security. So in some things that we do at DBT Aero, we want to use the public large language model. We're correcting grammar on a statement or a piece of document that's going to be public anyway. It's really handy to use a large language model that learns from everybody's language mistakes across all the different languages. And when we're doing something specific to us, specifically around engineering, we're going to want to pull that model into a private space, teach it a lot about how we at DBT Aero think, and then we can put problems at it that don't go anywhere. Yes. And after a period of time, we have this idea that we flush it. We throw that entire large language model out, and we start all over again and teach it all over again because it's picked up bad habits. And we want to make sure we get rid of those bad habits. So that's the thinking we're using. And when you're thinking about picking a model, context is so important. Application is so important. There's a lot of places when it's correcting my grammar, I really don't need a lot of transparency. I don't want to know how it got there. I got a sister who's an expert at grammar and spelling and those sort of things. I don't know how she gets there, but it works out great when she gives me advice. But, but when I'm designing an airplane and I'm doing my stress models, or I'm doing alternative designs for my parts manufacturing. I want to know how it got there. I'm modestly curious if I'm going to be sitting in this thing at 20,000 feet, whether or not the analysis was abandoned. So, that's how we're thinking about this.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. We are just scratching the surface of how AI can be applied everywhere, and this is one of the more interesting topics. And I absolutely and enthralled by everything that you all are doing. Ben, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you if they have any other questions?
The easiest thing to do is go to our website. We are updating it, and there'll be a place for people to click links and actually say, hey, I'm interested to talk to you. The other thing they can do is they can hit me at ben.nivert@dbt.aero. So it's ben.nivert@dbt.aero. They're more than welcome to send me an email, and I'll be glad to chat with them. And once the website is updated, we'll have a place for them to express interest if they want to be a pilot, if they're interested in our UAV product, and if they're just generally interested in following the aircraft, there'll be a place for them to interact, put their name and address. And we are looking at making sure we're in touch with people, because we think as we go forward, we're going to start getting pilots involved in some of the decisions we're going to make to make a good pilot's aircraft, especially in the general aviation space. Corporate space, enterprise, they tend to look for efficiency, and it's just got to be good for the pilots to fly. It's not as big a deal.
Yes.
But general aviation, if you expect
perfect sense. Yeah, and so we will, definitely have you back. We'll hear more from the great things that you all are doing. Encourage the audience to stay with us. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Thank you again, Ben. It's fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Bedeau, and welcome to AI Today. Here we're exploring AI's extraordinary potential, where we can use it in our everyday lives, as well as some of the fantastic things that other folks are using it for to make our lives better. But we're also looking at the ethical challenges and the other things, just to make sure folks are prepared to be able to use it. Thank you for being here as we journey through the heart of AI innovation, and we're really catering to enthusiasts as well as just folks that are trying to use it to improve their business and those kind of things. And so our topics are all over the place, as you know. It's really trying to figure out how we can help our fellow man, and how we can help our businesses grow. Very excited today to have a new guest on the show, Michael Duke from DBT Aero. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Michael is, as I said, he's with DBT Aero, and they have a fantastic mission. It's really trying to decarbonize aviation. We've talked a little bit about some of the fantastic uses of AI in the past, and this is a new topic for folks. And they're really looking to positively impact billions of lives. And as we all know, the sooner that we can do this, the better, from a social perspective, as well as just from a sustainment perspective. It's really going to change the lives of many of us. Michael, I think help our audience understand a little bit some of the ways that AI can help facilitate and accelerate some of the things that you're trying to do.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure. And I will start off by first saying I'm far from being an AI expert. It is certainly something that is changing the world, and we are excited to be a part of that. In terms of some of the things that AI can do in aviation, I'll start broadly in aviation, and then we can talk about specifically DBT Aero. In aviation, we currently contribute less than 3% of the global carbon emissions. But because aviation is so difficult to decarbonize, the belief is that as other industries are more quickly decarbonizing, aviation will be left with a much larger portion of that carbon pie. So our goal is to try to keep pace and maintain a low impact on the planet. As we do that, There's a number of places where AI can truly contribute to decarbonizing the aviation sector. Some of those are in routing. If you think about a smart co-pilot, a co-pilot is there to help guide. At the end of the day, the pilot makes the decisions, but the co-pilot helps provide better information and say, what about this? Or here's another alternative. One of the key things in aviation is routing. How much are you at full throttle? When are you not at full throttle? What altitudes are you flying at? By flying at altitudes that are less sensitive to impacting the environment, or during certain flight regimes, you want to be at different altitudes. AI with the proper data input can provide us some great insights on the output. And that's really, I think, one of the limitations right now is we need more aviation data input into some of these models. A lot of training and a lot of data has been ingested for a number of applications. We need to be growing the database of aviation information. And as we do that, we'll be able to then get some better insights. Another area is maintenance. And certainly maintenance is very important, knowing when there's going to be a failure. And there's lots of data, lots of sensors that can be provided on the engines, the aircraft systems, et cetera. And as we collect that data and begin to analyze it with AI, we'll then be able to better tell what our impact is, and how we can better be good citizens of the global planet.
And I think that's, my background is in computational fluid dynamics. I love aviation. It's one of those areas that's always been a passion of mine. And when you look at the, so many different parts and so many different touch points of it, from, the combustion piece to the avionics to the aero, AI is one of those things that as we become more familiar, and as you said, we get more data, it really does give us, an advantage in trying to optimize those sort of things. When you look specifically at some of the awesome stuff that you guys are doing, from, it looks like, new types of combustion, new types of airframes and stuff, where have you been able to, or your team been able to leverage some of those things, maybe from an optimization or even from a design perspective? Where have you been able to apply it?
Well, you can see from our background the very unique wing and tail structure that we have. The same thing is being applied to the internal portions of the structure. We're looking at 3D printing, various additive manufacturing techniques, and that is a very active area for AI as we start to look at the way that we might be able to make various parts to reduce part counts, as well as to increase the structural strength of a number of parts. So AI becomes very important as we look at structure and how to make the aircraft more affordable and easier to maintain, easier to assemble. One of the things that is unique is that double box tail. Because we have a complete structure, a closed loop, rather than a cantilever, we're actually able to provide much stronger wings with fewer materials. So in that respect, a lower requirement for materials means that we're more sustainable in our manufacturing as well.
Mm-hmm. So Michael, are you looking to really support the casual flyer, initially, or is it one of those things where you're starting to look at, some of the bigger adventures with, hopefully getting into some commercial activities, maybe even some UAV activities? What sort of things are y'all thinking about trying to do?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. Very often you'll find an aircraft design that is very specific. As a fifth grader, I had a fifth grade teacher who was a sailplane pilot, and he took me up for some flights, and it was amazing. And yet the sailplanes, the gliders, are designed for a very specific mission. One of the things that's unique about this design is that it's fairly flexible and it applies across many different missions and different sizes of aircraft. As a result, we actually are looking at all of those potential options. We're looking at UAVs currently, is likely our very first production commercialized product. For the casual flyer, the general aviation pilot, certainly this is a great opportunity. It saves them, somewhere between 30 and 50% of the fuel that they're currently burning. And again, that would be great and sustainable for the planet. It also scales up for larger passenger airliners, business jets. So this one is, a mock-up of a potential business jet. And it certainly is not supersonic. That's not our technology. And it's not for super, short takeoff and landing, the STOL aircraft. Again, that's not our focus. So it's not a sailplane. So there's different places where different aircraft configurations are more optimized. We are looking at a change in geometry to optimize the bulk of general aviation. Many people are looking at power plants, electric, particularly distributed electric, and that's why we're seeing just a plethora of new designs, particularly in the vertical takeoff. We believe that geometry is the next place that people really ought to be looking, and we feel that our geometry is currently the most efficient for the bulk of aircraft that need to fly.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I think everybody in the audience can relate to having to sit right behind the engines, smell the fuel until you finally get up in the air, and those sort of things. And it's not a pleasant experience by any stretch of the imagination. I'm really excited about some of the things that you guys are really, at the spear, really at the tip of the spear on the innovation piece. It's really fantastic. Michael, if folks have any questions, where can they get a hold of you at?
Our website is dbt.aero. A lot of people are like, well, is there a .com after that? No, there actually is a separate domain for aerospace companies. So it makes it very simple, dbt.aero. And there's an opportunity from there to sign up for a contact list. We're putting together a distribution, which will allow people to sign up and we can keep people informed. There's also an email where they can reach out and contact the team.
That's great. And I do encourage everybody to go out, take a look at their website, sign up for that. It also has some good information on some of the other projects that they're working on, and some of the awards that you guys have recently gotten. We'll talk about more about those in the coming weeks. But Michael, thank you for being here. Very excited for you to be on the show. Everybody stay with us. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Welcome back to AI Today. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Beddoe. Remember, we're exploring some interesting topics on the show. And, this week we're talking about large language models. I've gotten a lot of questions about that. Very excited to dive into it. And we've got a new guest this week, Mr. Evan Chi. He is the founder and CEO of Regenesis. And they are an AI sales and marketing platform that are doing things a little bit different in that they're helping companies try to automate the overall sales cycle. And, Evan's got over 20 years of experience working for a lot of different companies that are, in this space, such as, Oracle and Sony and, Hello Kitty and Bank of America, and really a very broad range of experience. Evan, it is fantastic for you to be here. Thank you.
Great to be here, Dr. Allen.
Yeah, so, Evan, this week we're jumping right in to the large language model topic. I've gotten a lot of questions from the audience on, how do they use them? How do they pick the right ones? What are the best ways to get them to really be able to perform the way that they want, both at work and at home? Can you tell me, how you all are looking at those sort of things at Regenesis?
Certainly. Well, we've certainly played with quite a few different models. And truthfully, depending on what you're trying to do, they can kind of all be very similar. There are, however, some differences. There's a few differences, like for instance, in price, like if you're connecting through an API, there are models like Claude that could be a little bit cheaper. And essentially, like if you're talking about generative, like content creation or images, typically ChatGPT is pretty good for that. We use Claude a lot though, from Anthropic. And the reason for that is because it gives you a lot of the information in a very well-structured way. So ChatGPT will kind of give you like a data dump of the things that you're looking for, and structure it how you prompt it to structure it. However, Anthropic or Claude will come out with kind of like pre-structured content for you. It's well formulated, bullet points and everything, so it's easy to understand. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of like what we like in that scenario.
Yeah. So when folks are using Regenesis and they're using, those sort of capabilities, how or are you interfacing with or allowing the user to interface with some large language model as they are using your tool set?
Right. So different companies use AI in different ways. So a lot of companies, they might use AI for data. A
Mhm.
lot of companies might use AI for other reasons to generate certain things. For us, it's very content driven. So we use AI as a tool to allow people to do a few things. Number one is to automate their sales process, and that sales process goes through social media like LinkedIn to email, even to SMS and voice. Um, and so we use a lot of large language models to help with that content creation, with how the outreach is going to look. And we're able to use very specific modules that allow the content or the, say, messaging sequences to be completely customized to, your profile or your LinkedIn profile. And so
Mhm.
that's how we're using it. We're using it to basically automate and create all of that outreach for you.
Yeah, and I've noticed as I've played around with it a little bit that it's does a fantastic job when it comes to the whole customization piece. And when you launch certain campaigns or use those other kind of features, it's not where you're going to send an email to an AI, a subject matter expert, asking them if they're using AI at all. I mean, that's one of the great things that I've seen in playing around with it. You know, so that interaction though it's really a little, it's comforting when it comes to those sort of things, because you only have one chance to make an impression. How much time did you all spend looking at those interactions and the large language models, and really give the audience a little bit of an idea on the process that you guys use to come up with the direction that you're going in?
So that's the part that, AI can doesn't really help you on, right? So it's the human component. It's kind of like dealing with humans and how they perceive things and their emotions. So that is a kind of an art in itself. And how do you say develop and nurture these relationships with human beings through AI in a very natural way? You probably know, but a lot of people they're kind of put off when they're reached out to or connected to or contacted by AI. They're just a little bit put off, and that will probably change over time as it becomes more and more normal. But you find that people are very sensitive to this. And so we, on the other side, must be sensitive as well, right? So we have to come up with, say, very human-like sequences where, you know, everything just feels like you're speaking to a human being. And I think that's really the trick. And to be able to nail down that cadence in a way where people are comfortable, really. And that in itself is kind of something that we've had to really get good at, and become really create an art out of.
Yeah, I have. I've actually set up Claude so that any email that I get asking me if I'm using AI, I have it just automatically filter it out, just because somebody should have done a little bit of research around that. Just saying. So from a customer base, commercial, you've got a lot of great customers on that side. Is there any market that you're focusing on? With the LinkedIn, really, focus that you guys have around that platform and pulling that data in. Are you looking to do some additional government stuff, or focusing more on the commercial space, or what's your direction you're going to go with that?
Well, a lot of say companies, they have a very specific focus, or they have a very specific ICP or some customer that they know is going to be their client. For us, we're kind of in this realm of like personal branding, and then increasing sales, and then using LinkedIn and your email as kind of like primary platforms for that. And then of course adding the automation piece to it. So if you or your company you know are in a space where LinkedIn is important to your endeavors, then this is something that, that's kind of like where we fit in. We don't necessarily address a certain industry, because pretty much all companies need sales, and all say, you know, say C-suite, or interesting personalities, they all need personal branding. And LinkedIn is really kind of like the go-to site for that today. Today when you walk into an event, you know, long past are the days where you hand someone a business card, right? Now it's always just connect on LinkedIn and boop, 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 there you go. And so it's really become the go-to connector for professionals in our space. And so that's why for us, it's kind of like a very important starting piece for the personal branding.
Yeah, and so from that perspective, Evan, how can people, get a demo? What's the most appropriate way for them to be able to reach out to you so that they can try it, play with it, and enjoy it as much as I do?
Oh, well, we try to make ourselves available, but definitely through email, definitely like letting us know through LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest ways to get a hold of us. We're there every single day, most every single moment of every day. So we're pretty easy to find in those regards.
Yeah, that's great. So you personally, though, I love giving out contact information to the audience so they can reach out to you for specific questions. You're going to be back on, most definitely as we move forward, and hopefully maybe we'll even be able to get a demo, show the audience how they can use it later on. But what's the easiest way for folks to get a hold of you specifically?
Definitely shoot me an email, evan@regenesis.io. Happy to hear from you.
That's great. Evan, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Excited what you guys are doing. It's really new, and as you said, building that personal brand and then leveraging that for sales. It's absolutely a great thing that you guys are tackling, and really enjoy my experience so far with it, and look forward to using it for some other things. So thank you again for being here. I want to thank the audience, of course, for watching this episode. I hope you learned a little bit more about large language models, how they can be used, where they shouldn't be used, and of course how you can take advantage of them to really impact your business and impact your daily lives. So with that, again, I'm your host, Dr. Alan Badeau. I appreciate you watching, and come back next week. We're going to have some more interesting topics. So thank you.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation.